The Wolves were trailing, the clock ticking mercilessly toward the final seconds of the high school basketball game. The tension on the court was unbearable. Coach called his players together, urgency in his voice, eyes scanning each one. "Dean," he said, "get the ball. Pass it to Mason, our last shot." Dean nodded, adrenaline pumping. The plan was simple, but the stakes couldn't be higher. The game resumed. Mason, known among his teammates as Horse, caught the pass and launched the first shot. The ball swished through the net perfectly. The crowd erupted, cheering, relief washing over the Wolves. For a moment, victory seemed within reach, but Mason's eyes caught something strange in the crowd, a burned, haunting figure, staring directly at him. It froze him in place. He slapped himself as if to wake from a nightmare, heart pounding. Time didn't wait. Dean regained possession and sprinted, weaving through defenders. Only 3 seconds remained on the clock. He found Mason and passed the ball. Mason struggled for balance, his hands shaking. In the final instant, he leapt and released the shot, and then, the burned apparition appeared, right in front of him. Mason's stomach dropped. Fear gripped him, sharp and immediate. But even through the terror, the ball arced perfectly, landing in the net. The final point sealed the Wolves' victory. The court erupted with cheers. His teammates celebrated. The crowd roared, but Mason couldn't move. His gaze was fixed on the ghostly image that only he could see. He ran straight to his locker, heart racing. Dean noticed the look in his friend's eyes and understood. Something was wrong. Mason opened his locker, hands trembling, and revealed a cursed whistle. His chest sank. He knew, deep down, this was what had drawn the ghost. And then, a whisper of his name. Footsteps approaching, deliberate and commanding. The air thickened, panic surged. Mason didn't know where to turn. With desperation, he slammed a weight down on the cursed whistle, shattering it into pieces. "Leave me alone," he shouted, voice echoing through the locker room. Silence followed. Then, a teammate entered, calm and steady, breaking Mason out of his terror. The fear ebbed, replaced by relief. Together, they joined the rest of the team, celebrating the hard-fought victory. Mason finally able to breathe again. Later that night, Mason tried to shake off the chaos, taking a shower in an attempt to cool his racing mind. Dean, oblivious to the lingering danger, continued praising him for the game. Suddenly, Mason froze. Something was off. He looked down and saw black, ash-like smoke curling beneath his feet. His heart leapt into his throat. He turned off the shower, panic rising, and spun around, just in time to see the burned ghost grab him by the neck. Within seconds, Mason was engulfed in flames, his screams piercing the house. Dean and the other teammates heard the horrifying cries and rushed in, only to find Mason burning alive in the shower, helpless and screaming for help. Months later, a new figure appeared at Pellington High School. Chris, a quiet and emotionally distant girl, sat alone on the roof of her new home, sketchbook in hand. She had just moved in with her cousin, Ree, and was nervously preparing for her first day at the same school. Lost in her thoughts, she barely noticed the world around her, until Ree barged into her room with food, snapping her back to reality. Ree casually rifled through her things, commenting on her progress in music. Chris, a little embarrassed, told him to give her things and leave. Ree reminded her to tidy up so they wouldn't be late for her first day at school. At Pellington High, Ree showed Chris around. It didn't take long for her to notice a girl named Ellie. Something clicked, an immediate, unspoken connection. Chris opened her assigned locker and noticed the name Horse. Ree explained that it had once belonged to Mason, though he didn't go into details about what had happened. Before she could dwell on it, Dean appeared with his friends, claiming she couldn't use the locker because it had belonged to his deceased friend. Dean's girlfriend, Grace, who also happened to be Ree's crush, walked in. She casually dismissed Dean, joking that Pellington School had been around for generations and that all lockers had belonged to students who were long gone. Dean reluctantly backed down. Ree complimented Grace on her hair, which clearly irked Dean. Dean's hostility escalated. He began mocking Chris, trying to humiliate her and spreading cruel rumors that she had recently been in rehab after allegedly killing her father. Ellie, witnessing the cruelty, immediately stepped in to defend Chris. Fueled by anger and frustration, Chris reacted decisively, kicking Dean in the groin. Ree and Grace couldn't help but laugh at Dean's misfortune. The situation spiraled, and Mr. Craven, a teacher, appeared, giving detention to Chris. Dean, Grace, and Ree. Ellie protested, insisting Chris hadn't done anything wrong, but her defiance only earned her a spot in detention as well. Forced to sit through the consequences of standing up for a friend, Ellie, still feeling guilty about what happened earlier, tried to make things right. She approached Chris gently, even apologizing on behalf of her friends. When some of Chris's belongings fell from her locker, Ellie quickly bent down to help pick them up, but Chris wasn't having it. Still guarded and distant, she brushed Ellie off coldly. The rejection stung. Ellie paused for a moment, clearly hurt, before quietly walking away. Left alone, Chris glanced back into the locker, Mason's old locker. Something caught her eye. Hidden inside was the same strange, cursed whistle, Curious, she picked it up, turning it over in her hands. She raised it to her lips, about to blow, but the bell rang. The moment was broken. Chris slipped the whistle into her bag and headed to class. Inside the classroom, things quickly took a turn. As Chris settled in, the whistle slipped from her bag and hit the floor. Dean immediately noticed. With a smirk, he raised his hand and asked Mr. Craven if drug pipes were allowed in school. The class chuckled. Mr. Craven stepped in, picking up the whistle. As he examined it closely, his expression shifted. This wasn't just some random object. Carved into its surface were strange, ancient markings. Kaba Pixen. He muttered. Later, after translating it online, the meaning became clear. Summon the dead. Chris immediately tried to take the whistle back, but Mr. Craven refused. He insisted it could hold significant historical value, and since it was found on school grounds, it now belonged to the school. Chris wasn't happy about that. Not at all. Trying to move things forward, Mr. Craven assigned the group a joint project. After class, they agreed to meet later that evening, 7 p.m. at Grace's house. Later that day, curiosity got the better of Mr. Craven. He began researching the whistle in detail, digging through obscure websites and artifact listings. Eventually, he stumbled upon something shocking, a marketplace where similar items were being bought and sold. One listing caught his eye, value, $35,559. His face lit up instantly. This wasn't just rare, it was valuable. Excited, he decided to test it. He lifted the whistle and blew into it. The sound came out clean. Perfect condition. To him, it was just a valuable artifact. But he had no idea what he had just triggered. Not long after, Ree rushed back to school, realizing he had forgotten his Avengers book. As he searched for it, he stumbled across Mr. Craven's desk, and the whistle. Then he saw the laptop screen. The price. Without thinking twice, Ree grabbed the whistle and left. When Mr. Craven returned, the whistle was gone. Panic flickered across his face. As he searched, he heard a faint sound coming from the hallway. He stepped out and spotted someone in the distance. "Hey, you can't be here," he called out, trying to escort the figure off school property. But suddenly, a hand tapped his shoulder. It was the cleaner. The man said he had been calling Mr. Craven for a while. Confused, Mr. Craven insisted he hadn't heard anything. Maybe he'd just been overworking himself. He turned back to the hallway. No one was there. The cleaner casually mentioned he could smell cigarettes, but reassured him not to worry, his secret was safe. Something about that felt off. Back inside, everything changed. Mr. Craven wasn't alone. The presence revealed itself. The same burned, terrifying entity tied to the whistle. Before he could react, it was already too late. His body twisted, consumed in a horrifying transformation, as he met the same brutal fate as Mason. The pattern was now undeniable. Something unnatural had been unleashed, and it was hunting anyone connected to the whistle. That same evening, at Grace's house, everything felt normal again. Music, laughter, conversation, the group was enjoying themselves, until Ree pulled out the cursed whistle. He casually admitted he had taken it from Mr. Craven's desk and handed it to Grace. Chris immediately tensed. This wasn't right. She could feel it. Grace, however, was curious. Without hesitation, she raised the whistle and blew into it. A loud, unnatural sound ripped through the room, deep, distorted, and filled with something evil. The entire atmosphere shifted instantly. Everyone froze. Chris didn't wait. She turned and walked out. Ellie quickly followed her outside. She apologized again, explaining that her friends could be reckless sometimes. Then she invited Chris to something important, the annual Pellington Harvest Festival. She smiled softly, admitting she'd really like it if Chris came. Ree soon joined them, and Ellie told Chris to get her number from him so they could talk more about it. Then she left. As Ellie walked away, Chris turned to Ree, curious. "Is Ellie straight?" Ree shrugged. He had no idea. The next morning, Chris and Ree arrived at school, but something felt wrong. The entire place was unusually quiet. No chatter, no movement, just silence hanging in the air. As they stepped into the hallway, the news hit them. Mr. Craven was dead. Shock spread across their faces. It didn't make sense, but deep down, it did. At that same moment, Ellie, standing nearby, suddenly froze. Her eyes locked onto something in front of her. Something no one else could see. Her head tilted slightly, her expression distant, almost ghost-like. Grace walked over casually and handed the whistle back to Chris, brushing it off. She didn't want anything to do with it anymore. Ellie snapped back to her senses, shaken. After a pause, she suggested something important. They should return the whistle to Mason's family. They made their way to Mason's house. The place was eerily quiet, almost abandoned, as if no one had lived there for years. Then, slowly, an elderly woman appeared. Mason's grandmother. Chris handed her the whistle. The woman's expression darkened instantly. She explained that the whistle wasn't just cursed. It didn't simply summon death. It connects people to the way they were always meant to die, their fate. She revealed that it had already caused her unimaginable pain. She couldn't keep it. She wouldn't. Handing it back to Chris, she warned them, it wouldn't stop until they found a way to end it. Determined, Chris and Ellie began digging into Mason's past. What they found didn't add up. Official reports claimed his death was caused by a gas accident. But the details told a different story. Injuries, physical changes, none of it matched. Something unnatural had taken him, and now, it was coming for them. Back at school, tension continued to rise. Dean still mocked others, refusing to believe any of it, even as fear quietly spread through everyone. But Grace wasn't so lucky. She began seeing things. An old woman, unnatural, disturbing, appearing out of nowhere, whispering her name, watching her, following her. Eventually, it led her into a haunted maze attraction during the festival. Inside, reality itself began to collapse. The maze twisted, shifting into something alive. Grace ran, panicked, injured, but there was no escape. The entity caught her, and in a horrifying moment, she transformed into an aged, broken version of herself. Before dying, the curse was real, and it couldn't be stopped. Her death shattered the group. Dean refused to accept it. He denied everything, but Ree confronted him directly, blaming him for pushing Grace into blowing the whistle. The argument exploded into a fight. Dean lashed out, accusing Ree of being jealous, claiming he only cared because he had a crush on Grace. People like you don't get someone like her, he snapped. That hit hard. Ree was left shaken. Later that night, Dean returned home, but something followed him. He began seeing it, his own death, a violent force stalking him, recreating the exact way he was meant to die. No matter what he did, he couldn't escape it. In a brutal, terrifying sequence, Dean was killed, his body crushed in a way that mirrored a fatal car crash. That same night, Chris and Ellie sat together. The weight of everything pressing down on them. Chris opened up about how broken her life had been, how everything felt wrong. Ellie listened, then quietly told her she didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was her. In that moment, the two slowly leaned in and kissed, desperate for answers. Chris, Ellie, and Ree returned to Mason's grandmother. This time, they uncovered the full truth. The whistle doesn't create death, it forces it to happen early. Everyone already has a predetermined end, and the whistle simply speeds it up. But there was one possible solution, a dangerous one. Death could be transferred through blood. Ree became obsessed. Terrified of his own fate, he was willing to do anything to escape it, even if it meant sacrificing someone else. This created a deep divide between him and Ellie, who refused to harm innocent people. But Ree didn't stop. Meanwhile, chaos escalated. A dangerous man named Noah, posing as a youth pastor, became entangled in the situation. Ree saw him as the perfect target. He captured Noah, preparing to force the curse onto him. But just as he was about to act, supernatural force activated. Ree's time had run out. His assigned death caught up to him, violently tearing through his body in a brutal, unstoppable moment. There was no escaping fate. With Ree gone, Chris and Ellie were left with one final, unstable idea. If the whistle forces death, then maybe they could beat it, by dying first. In an abandoned industrial space, they prepared the plan, using insulin to stop the heart, and adrenaline to bring it back. A controlled death, a reset. Chris volunteered. She injected herself. Her heart stopped. Ellie panicked, but pushed through, performing CPR, fighting to bring her back. At that same moment, Noah regained consciousness. Armed and desperate, he tracked them down and forced his way in, firing a gun. But something was waiting for him. The same entity, the same cross he wore, now reflected in the horror before him. He fired, but the bullets turned on him. One by one, they struck his own body, and just like that, he was gone. Moments later, Chris gasped back to life. It worked, but not without consequences. Both she and Ellie were changed permanently. The whistle was destroyed in the process. The curse, at least for now, was gone. 3 months later, life slowly returned to normal. Chris and Ellie were together, back at school, walking side by side, hands gently brushing, finally at peace. For the first time, everything felt calm, but not for long, because somewhere, a new student finds something hidden, the same artifact, the same whistle, and just like that, it begins again. That's the end of the movie. Make sure to subscribe.